and rivers, glaciers and ice ages, all to form the area we see today. I'll be back in a few minutes with more modern history of humans at Lake Mead. as along the Colorado itself, the federal government established a series of forts. It wasn't long before astute businessmen realized that the Colorado River might provide a faster and easier way to transport people and supplies from the Pacific coast to the interior settlements. Thus, steamboats came to the Colorado River. Commercial steamer service on the Colorado was started by George Johnson in 1852. His boat, the General Jessup, worked the Colorado from the Gulf of California to Fort Yuma. Other boats, including the very first, the Uncle Sam, and the largest, the Gila, were